Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Great. I think that's everybody filing in. Oop, 1 second. There's a little doorbell noise. I think Karim, my colleague, is going to take care of that. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Butter. This is my first time using this app. I don't know about you guys. It seems a bit more, a bit nicer in terms of presentation from a UX experience than Zoom. We'll see whether the technical experience is as smooth, but bear with us if there are any issues. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you here today. I'm just going to turn that off so I don't get the notifications. My name is Adam. I'm one of the co-founders here at YASO. YASO is a newly launched beauty incubator providing turnkey solutions for ambitious brands that are looking to capitalize on the Chinese social commerce opportunity. We offer everything from store setup to operations, to logistics, to payments, to content creation, community management, influencer partnerships, and so on and so forth. In short, everything that I'm going to be talking about here today. So without further ado, let's get cracking. China's beauty and skincare market is experiencing somewhat of a boom at the moment, to say the least, and has really kind of positioned itself as a formidable global player. The market is set to top $60 billion this year, with a projected compound annual growth rate of about 5% all the way through to 2028. The Chinese e-commerce market, in addition to this, is already the largest, the most innovative in the world. By some estimates, worth as much as 2.8 trillion, which is more than the next 9 markets put together. It's about 3 or 4 times the size of the US e-commerce market. And these figures all put together really solidify China's position as the second largest beauty market in the world, trailing only the US. Remarkably, within the Asia-Pacific region, China is poised to drive nearly 70% of the growth in the beauty and personal care market right up until 2025 and beyond. It is, however, a very tough nut to crack and only getting harder, as anyone familiar with the Chinese e-commerce and retail space will tell you. And here at YASO, we've seen this firsthand. Our founding team have decades of combined China market entry experience, hundreds of brand launches under our collective belt. But for all of the challenges that many brands in China are now facing, whether those are regulatory, cultural, competitive, geopolitical even, show me any other market that compares in terms of the opportunity. Now, these top-line growth figures, as big and as exciting as they are, mask some very important shifts in the post-COVID beauty landscape in China, shifts that create difficulties for some brands already in the market, whilst also opening up significant opportunities for more nimble newcomers looking to outmaneuver the established competition. And today, what I want to do is pool these shifts in 3 general buckets: the changing Chinese beauty consumer, the changing mix of products that they're demanding, and the changing ways in which they're shopping. And what I want to do is inspire you, maybe intimidate you a little bit, but ultimately deliver a few practical tips and takeaways for you to go away and accelerate your China journey today. So let's get cracking. Now, I want to start off with some basics, right? What or who is fueling this beauty boom in China at the moment? At its core, as with all retail stories in China, this is a story of a rising middle class who have not only increased their disposable income, but have also demonstrated greater propensity to invest in personal grooming and self-care. As consumers seek elevated experiences, superior quality, a demand for premium foreign beauty products in particular has continued to rise, fueling an overall growth of the industry. One direct result of this shifting trend has been the rise of premiumization, right? Higher end brands in particular gaining significant traction as female consumers in particular are prioritizing self-investment and aligning their beauty purchases with a flourishing wellness and self-care set of lifestyle trends. And recent data shows that the premium beauty sector in particular has already captured about 53% of the total market share in market, with that set to grow significantly over the next few years. And as if we didn't need any good examples of this, Chanel just a few weeks or months ago launched its Le Rouge number 31 lipstick, with a price point of about $190 for a single lipstick, and 3 of the 12 available shades sold out on their Tmall flagship store within minutes of going live. Now, again, these top-line numbers, as big and as exciting as they are, do mask developments on a more granular level in terms of who it is that's actually buying beauty products, with a knock-on effect in terms of what products they're seeking to buy, the stories that they're buying into, all of these things that you need to take into consideration. And I want to show 3 maps. They're all kind of very cliches, if you like, on any presentation on the China retail space, but I think important to kind of set the groundwork here. The risk of stating the obvious, China is a very big country with a huge amount of diversity in its beauty buying population. Geographically, it's about the same size as the US in terms of landmass, but has a population about 3 to 4 times as big. Individual provinces have GDP that dwarf entire G20 countries. And we can see on the left-hand side here, if you can read that small, the provincial size of some of these, the size of some of these Chinese provinces and their equivalents in terms of other countries, the entire GDP of Canada or Russia or Australia mimicked in the provinces of Shandong, Jiangxi and Zhejiang provinces. It also is a country of wildly different climates, right? Skincare routines for consumers living in China's incredibly dry, incredibly cold at times north, an area prone to sandstorms, is very different to consumers living in the tropical climates of the southwest, which again is very different from the urban environments in which air pollution is a very real concern. You as a brand wouldn't dream of launching the same product line with the same functionality to an audience in the Middle East or North Africa versus consumers in Scandinavia, for example. But for so long, beauty brands in China have, in all honesty, done exactly that. We then have cities split across so-called different tiers on the right-hand side here, the dark green representing so-called tier 1 cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, the cities that are most economically developed, through to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, even tier 5 cities, areas that have urban populations numbering in the millions, many of them bigger than many of the capital cities in Europe. But again, brands often without a kind of segmented strategy there. Now, typically, this has not been something that brands have had to worry too much about. Most premium beauty consumption has happened in these so-called tier 1 cities. But over the last few years, and certainly over the next decade, what we're seeing is that the majority of China's middle class and therefore consumption growth is coming from these lower tier cities. And what this means is that during the pandemic and since then, we've seen a lot of big multinational businesses who have embarked on a degree of soul searching, looking for the next China, as China's become more difficult to operate in. But the reality is that the next China is China. It's the lower tier cities as they start to grow. And as the purchasing power of those areas increases, an ever more diverse range of interests, needs, product mixes is coming online for the first time, fueling changes in the kinds of businesses, the kinds of products that are being bought. The transparency and ease of access to information in these places is starting to disrupt the kinds of brands that are succeeding in the market. And what this has allowed is a range of particularly Chinese brands to come through and start performing very well. I'll talk very briefly now and over the next few slides about some of the kind of big names that we're seeing in the Chinese space, some brands you may be familiar with, some hopefully not. The first is by far and away one of the biggest, which is Proya. It's been going 11 years. And has become one of the kind of leaders in beauty and skincare in the market, increased its turnover by about 35-40% last year, reaching about 2.6 billion renminbi, $800 million. And it's a retail strategy that has based almost exclusively on reaching consumers in so-called lower tier cities that I mentioned before. It has a retail presence in about 500 different Chinese cities, and started off doing this in order to start developing a new business model where they could build that market share amongst rural consumers, more rural consumers, and then gradually elevate themselves a little bit higher. And thanks to this positioning, its selling of affordable products, its sales volume, as I said, has been going up quite dramatically and is starting to eat away at established market share of some of the larger players in the market. Now, cutting across these geographic considerations are, of course, generational changes in the way that beauty consumers are shopping in China. And I'm, of course, talking about the rise of Gen Z. Born between 1997 and 2012, depending on how you're kind of defining them, they have, over the last few years, emerged as a very, very significant consumer group in the beauty category. They only account for about 20% of China's total population. It's about 250 to 300 million of them. But they already account for a remarkable 40% of total consumption in the market. And what's more, over the next decade, they're forecasted to make up about 73%, 3/4 of new entrants into the workforce. As a result, their level of consumption is anticipated to quadruple over the next decade, reaching something in the region of about $2.2 trillion US. It's very reasonable to say, therefore, that the Gen Z consumer in shopper, if it isn't already, is going to become a critical driver of consumption growth in China. This is a consumer that quite literally is the future, if not the present already, of Chinese retail. Now, this is a consumer that is, of course, hyper connected. They're spending already about 7 hours a day on social media. But what's important is not just the length of time that they're spending on social media, but how they're using those platforms in order to inform their purchasing decisions. Recommendations from so-called key opinion leaders, influencers, accounts for about 78% of web traffic. Word of mouth, another 52%. WeChat group chats and shopping guides, another 33%. About 63% of Gen Z would recommend or share brands they like with their friends on social media. All of these numbers significantly higher than their international counterparts. What this means is that for brands that have a kind of more traditional advertising to e-commerce model that focuses on selling, on data collection, what we're now seeing is the brands that are increasingly winning amongst these younger demographics are businesses that focus on fostering a sense of community and interactivity. This is also a generation that is buying beauty and skincare in droves. Cosmetics and skincare are the most frequent category already in Gen Z's shopping cart. About 1 in 4 Gen Z consumers purchase these products more than once a month. Skincare and makeup routines are essential to most daily practice in the market. Only about 0.6% of Gen Z say that they don't have any kind of daily skincare routine. 60% of Gen Z women wear makeup on working days, 38% wearing makeup every single day, even during the pandemic. And furthermore, there's about 70% of Gen Z that are already spending more than $50 a month on skincare and on cosmetic products. Now, the fact that Gen Z represents the future of retail is already hyper-connected and is already a huge consumer of beauty and skincare products is important because they're also a generation that is increasingly breaking with social norms, behaviors, expectations, and in so doing are kind of transforming the way that Chinese consumers shop, what it is that they're buying, and ultimately the kind of very relationship between brands and consumers. A generation ago, the route to success in China was working hard, getting married, moving to the city, having children, and strict government controls and restrictions on certain freedoms was seen as a kind of fair trade-off, as millions of people were being lifted gradually out of poverty. But what we've seen over the last few years, and particularly since the pandemic, is an increasing ennui amongst younger generations in particular as this social contract starts to fracture. This, of course, isn't unique to China. Quiet quitting in the US and in Europe is a thing that everybody is kind of reckoning with. But increasingly, what we're seeing in China is a sense that graduates in particular are doing everything that they've been brought up to do, right? They're studying hard, getting jobs where they can. There's very high youth unemployment in China at the moment, moving to the city, all for a sense of very little return, a trend known as neijian or involution. Many young Chinese people now feel that fear that they will be the first generation not to be better off than their parents before them. And what this has done has led to a boom in a variety of different subcultures and consumer trends, from lying flat, tangping, which many of you will have heard of, to runology, pushing back a kind of grueling 996 work culture, this working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Letting it rot, Bai Lan, is kind of giving up entirely on careers that feel like impossible things to attain. A reference to the idea that young people today work in very competitive environments with few prospects for real advancement, and actually might be better just to move back to the countryside and spend time living in a rural environment. The lying flat trend has given rise to this trend of so-called touching fish, a philosophy that with young people kind of slacking off at work and carving out little moments to have a little bit of time where you can go and literally touch fish in a goldfish bowl, kind of, relax a little bit at work. And runology, this idea of running away, essentially the study of how to emigrate, how to run overseas, a response to kind of worsening conditions in China, in particular for young people. And what this has done, this kind of sense of a bit of negativity amongst the consumer population, particularly for young consumers, has triggered a kind of rethink of some of the priorities that consumers have, a rise of a more, what you might call, more impact conscious consumer. That's increasingly kind of demonstrating greater concern for the body, for social issues, for the environment as well. A reordering of consumer priorities, an expansion of traditional definitions of health and wellness, greater consciousness around mental health, work-life balance, a return to simplicity. All of these things are meaning that consumers are increasingly prioritizing brands whose ethos mirrors those values, and as such are demanding products and solutions that provide health-enhancing benefits. What this has also done is triggered a reassessment among some consumers of what beauty even means. China is a country that traditionally has some quite strict beauty standards, but body positivity has been heightened during the pandemic and beyond, with several domestic Chinese brands really being instrumental in pushing this forward and becoming more inclusive. Leading the charge on this is a lingerie brand called Neiwai, who last year partnered up with L'Oreal to do a joint campaign with the goal of making Chinese women feel more comfortable in their own skin, titled "It Takes Boldness to Be Nude." Featured women embracing a variety of different skin tones and types, marked the launch of 2 new product lines, one from L'Oreal and one from Neiwai, both with nude tone color palettes matched up with each other, that was supposed to kind of complement Asian skin tones in particular. And the idea here was to encourage more Chinese women to embrace the look of their natural skin tones and types. A concept that fits very well with Neiwai's kind of previous campaigns that emphasize beauty amongst natural body types. This is, of course, not to say that mainstream Chinese beauty standards, pale skin, large eyes, high bridged nose, do not continue to be important amongst Gen Z consumers. They do. But from a storytelling, a kind of community-focused standpoint, there's something quite interesting there. Now, these messages of female empowerment have proved somewhat of a mainstay now for many beauty brands looking to kind of build community in the market. It really kind of kicked off with a very famous SK2 campaign a number of years ago, I think 2016 or 17, on the topic of so-called leftover women, women over the age of 30 who haven't married and therefore seen in a very sexist way as being kind of leftover. For International Women's Day this year, Australian clean beauty brand Aesop removed all of their products from its flagship store in Shanghai and replaced them with feminist literature to create a women's library with books and content and leaflets available for consumers to take home. Meanwhile, at the same time, they also launched a series of discussion activities, podcast programs in partnership with a variety of renowned Chinese podcasters and broadcasters, exploring the relationship between women, society, literature, etc. Now, this campaign was a huge hit. Long queues every single day, close to 1 million views on all-important platform Little Red Book. And was actually a really smart campaign on a few different levels. First of all, it allowed the brand to communicate on messaging beyond its global emphasis on clean products, a topic that still is quite niche in the market. But it also walked a very fine line when it comes to social issues. Sometimes these kinds of initiatives come under a lot of scrutiny in China. They are seen as patronizing, maybe even a little bit unwelcome. Topics like inclusion, diversity, as we understand them, don't necessarily translate particularly well in the market. But by showcasing only Chinese discourse, Chinese language, literature, Chinese thinkers on this topic, Aesop managed to present these kind of women's issues in a very tasteful and very engaging manner, and really enhanced its position as a socially conscious and responsible brand. It's interesting to note that this was just one local iteration of a wider global campaign. The original edition in Australia was actually a queer library. Some social issues still remain relatively taboo from a marketing perspective. Now, if you're surprised to see Aesop, a kind of famously clean brand, doing so well in China, you presumably haven't picked up on the fact that animal testing rules in the country have been relaxed in recent years, despite some kind of prevailing misconceptions. Again, the pandemic and the rise of Gen Z is now creating new opportunities for brands that do focus on clean as an identity, though it does still remain a little bit niche. So what does clean mean in the Chinese context? Now, it's important to note that clean, in the sense of cruelty-free, doesn't really carry a huge amount of weight amongst typical beauty shoppers in China at the moment. It is changing. At the end of the day, this is a pet-loving nation, and there have been some important gains in animal protection over the last few years. From a sustainability standpoint, however, this topic is becoming more and more important. But again, there are some interesting differences between what sustainability means in a Chinese context to a more global context. When Chinese consumers in general think about sustainability, their primary concern is related to kind of personal health, impact on daily life, the future deterioration of the spaces in which they inhabit. What really seems to resonate is how sustainability and climate change is critical to the immediate lived experience of day-to-day life. 74% of Chinese consumers have indicated that they would choose brands with traceable sources and transparent origins, much higher than the proportion of global consumers at 53%. And this desire to have an impact on an individual level is combined with digitally native behaviors. So we've seen huge adoption and rollout of various initiatives by all the big tech companies, Tencent, Alibaba, etc., characterized by ease of entry, gamified experiences. Last year on Little Red Book, Xiaohongshu, we saw a 5-fold increase in the number of posts with the hashtag easy sustainability, with users sharing accessible, fun, easy to adopt steps and strategies to consume and act in eco-friendlier ways. And it was listed as a top 10 trend on the platform that year. Now, where clean messaging does resonate really is on safety and efficacy. Consumers genuinely believe that clean products are better for you and better for your health. 77% of consumers surveyed in a recent poll believe that healthy or clean skincare products are safer than ordinary ones. 60% think they're more effective. And younger consumers in particular, Gen Z, are more willing to pay for safety-related claims, free from, for sensitive skins, natural ingredients, 100% plant-based, etc., etc. This focus on the self and what buying sustainably can do for me shows that really the all-importance of brand when it comes to long-term growth, especially in a very competitive space, for all of that importance, China still predominantly is an efficacy-driven market. And to be very blunt, beyond pretty packaging, celebrity endorsements, if your product doesn't work, if it doesn't solve a specific and very easily identifiable need faced by Chinese consumers, you're going to face a very significant uphill struggle in the market. Now, I can talk for a very long time about consumer fit and where I believe there are the best opportunities at the moment in the market. Indeed, our job here at YASO is precisely to identify those gaps, source brands are the best place to plug them. But we don't have a huge amount of time today. And of course, I want to leave you hanging for a little bit more. We have a trends report coming out in the next couple of weeks, highlighting the 6 beauty categories that we believe are most exciting. So watch this space, and we'll be sending out a link to that in the very near future. Instead, what I want to do today is very quickly dive in on 3 solutions, if you like, 3 functionalities that you do very well to address when thinking about how your product range might align with China: sensitive skin, anti-aging, and head care. Now, sensitive skin is a huge topic in the market. A third of Chinese women are troubled with some kind of sensitive skin. 59% of consumers will consider a product's suitability for sensitive skin when purchasing. And as a result, the majority of consumers are now looking for natural and organic ingredients that are free of parabens, free of artificial colors, free of synthetic fragrances in their everyday consumer beauty brands, with a particular focus on product benefits such as anti-inflammation, redness reduction, color products for oily skin types, etc. There are quite literally millions of posts on the subject on Chinese social media platforms, and something that's taken on more and more importance since the pandemic as people wear face masks in day-to-day life and still continue to do so today. Now, some of the biggest brands out there focus almost exclusively on sensitive skin as a functionality. The biggest case study that I could possibly think of is Winona, a Chinese brand that you may or may not have heard of, but is doing incredible numbers in the market. They're not a new brand. They're owned by a 100-year-old Chinese parent company, but became the first Chinese domestic beauty brand to break into Tmall's top-ranked beauty brands back in 2020. This year, their sales topped 5 billion renminbi, about 700 million US dollars. And they currently have about a 24% market share when it comes to kind of dermatology grade skincare. Now, there are some interesting factors behind their success. Number one has been their very narrow focus in terms of product strategy. About 90% of the posts about Winona on Chinese social media are related to sensitive skin. They have about 20,000 search results on the app for Winona sensitive skin. And they've really kind of drilled down onto that and really only focus on that in terms of the products they produce. It's a brand that is driven by its dermatology claims and functionality. They have their own R&D team with hundreds of employees, constantly working on new publications. They've published in over 100 different academic journals in both the domestic and international space. They've worked with about 3,000 different hospitals in China. Even their packaging, right, is meant to resemble the kind of Red Cross symbol. And then they also have a very elevated live streaming strategy. In addition to working with some of the kind of top tier live streamers who I'll mention in a few minutes time, they offer Q&A sessions with doctors and dermatologists for live consultations. Very, very exciting brand. In the anti-aging space, again, this is a category that is almost unrivaled in China. According to most recent data, it's about 60% or so of 20 to 30-year-olds who are already using anti-aging products. 20% of the under 25s already feel very anxious about aging, and 28% of people born after the year 2000 are already using anti-aging products. Unsurprisingly, therefore, last year there was about a 64% jump in the number of products being sold online in China with making anti-aging claims. And again, what you see is Chinese brands in particular that are leading the way with this messaging in terms of product development, influencer collaborations, etc. Again, best-in-class example of this is a brand called Cans, launched in 2002, but rebranded in 2021. This is a kind of medium to high-end skincare brand that focuses on providing effective skincare products under the slogan, "Science realizes your beauty." They changed that strapline, as I said, in 2021 to focus exclusively on younger demographics, with anti-aging at the heart of its brand. Again, with the slogan, "Cans providing confidence for young people." And again, there are kind of three key factors to their offering. One is, of course, that very, very targeted product focus. The second is their ability to tap into so-called China pride, this guochao trend, which I won't talk too much about today, but is at the heart of many kind of Chinese beauty brand success in the market, and position themselves as the Chinese player in a space dominated by foreign brands. They've also lent into things like sponsoring the Chinese swimming team, that we can see here. They had about 100 million views within a few days of the launch of this campaign, partnered with a very big live streamer, Austin Lee, who we'll mention again a little bit later. They sold out of their product release within 1 second of the live stream launching. And this kind of collaborative approach, again, is a kind of key part of the success. They partnered up with a whole range of category leaders in the Chinese retail space. For example, Valentine's Day last year, they worked with a flower delivery platform called Flowers Plus to deliver kind of packages of beauty brands and beauty products and flowers to encourage people to kind of self-love and self-care as well. Then the final kind of little subcategory I want to mention is head care. Again, a space that is expanding like nothing else in China. Hair care for many years in China has been overshadowed by categories like skincare, color cosmetics, fragrance, etc. But it really is in the spotlight right now. Problem solving and efficacy is driving this. Hair loss is a big problem in China. About 1 in 6 Chinese adults, about 250 million people, suffer from alopecia. So we've seen a huge drive in hair growth serums, scalp care oils, vitamin-infused shampoos. Gen Z is a big sufferer of this as well. The average age of individuals that are starting to lose hair is about 20 years younger than it was in previous generations. And what we're seeing is kind of hair and scalp care was the hottest, the biggest personal care category on most social media and social commerce platforms in 2020 and 2021. Last year, demand for hair care products grew by about 33% already. Now, what's interesting in this space is that we're seeing a kind of skincareization of hair care. And this really has become one of the biggest trends in the beauty space, thanks in part to influencers, beauty gurus, media personalities, increasingly educating followers about the ingredients found in hair care products. A space that was traditionally dominated by, your standard supermarket kind of P&G, Unilever products, is now seeing consumers upgrade their hair care journey, investing in natural, organic shampoos, conditioners, hair oils, scalp serums, in a shift that extends beyond Western markets. So organic beauty, mineral-based cosmetics have a very long history in China. We're now starting to see that applied in the hair care space. It's also a consumer space that is very fickle. 66% of consumers say that they don't keep using the same hair care products, and about 67% of 25 to 39-year-olds will shift up their products on a monthly basis in order to try new solutions. Now, you might be not surprised to hear that it's some of the big name multinationals like L'Oreal owned Kerestes with about 15% market share, and P&G brands that are doing particularly well. But we're also seeing kind of niche newcomers like Uraib, luxury hair care brand that costs about $80 just for one single product, 250 ml bottle of shampoo, or high-end scalp care brands like La Terapia, founded only a couple of years ago, who are providing clean solutions tailored to Asian hair types, uniting the finest quality ingredients with clinically proven cutting-edge technology. Now, a common feature across all of these different case studies is a very highly evolved channel strategy, typified by a focus on social commerce in particular. Social commerce in China is more than just buying stuff on social media. It is a holistic, a constantly shifting set of dedicated tools, platforms, techniques that allow you to target, to acquire, to convert new customers. And it has very quickly, in a very short space of time, become the primary way of selling online in the market. And social commerce technology is increasingly allowing brands, particularly SMEs, to enter the market in a more sustainable and cost-effective manner. Now, there are three key elements to social commerce in my mind that provide this kind of holistic strategy in a very highly verticalized format. The first is this kind of see now, buy now attitude, right? This integrated customer journeys, strong data-driven capabilities that allow brands to build value through content, through collaborations, as well as also being able to capitalize on impulse purchases at high traffic moments, whether those be live streams or key retail moments like Singles Day. It's also a space that is very experience driven, direct consumer interaction, such as consultations with salespeople or dermatologists through live streams, the creation of so-called private traffic groups, kind of think of it as like a WhatsApp group for your highly valued consumers, a variety of loyalty schemes that become available through a wide variety of platforms. All of these things further enhance your ability to build very rich data-driven profiles and highly targeted campaigns that really kind of emphasize retargeting and repurchasing. And then perhaps most importantly, it's a very peer-led space, whether this is through user reviews, through influencers, through other forms of gatekeeping to niche consumer communities. Social commerce is really kind of, as I said, reshaping the way that retail is done in the market. And what we've seen is that whereas for a very long time, for decades even now, the Alibaba-led ecosystem, so platforms like Tmall, like Taobao, have dominated the space. What we've seen is that as social commerce has come to the fore, these platforms are starting to lose market share to some of these new platforms. Most notably Douyin, which we'll come to in a second. But for the first time last year, possibly the year before, Alibaba's overall market share of B2C e-commerce dropped below 50%, quite a big shift. And this has become even more visible in the beauty space in particular. There are a plethora of new platforms that are driving innovation, increasing their own market shares by becoming very intentional about customer experience, about incorporating customer interaction into e-commerce apps. And this is something that Alibaba, frankly, just hasn't been very successful at pivoting towards. And so whereas Tmall used to offer really the only viable route to market for many beauty brands, these shifts have opened up more effective ways of entering the market. And we see this very evidently in how much money people are spending, brands are spending on other platforms. A drop in Alibaba skincare sales of 27% last year and an increase of 365% in Douyin. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about two platforms in particular, and unsurprisingly, these are the two platforms on this chart that command the biggest market share. The first I'll talk about is Xiaohongshu, or Red, Little Red Book. Without a doubt, one of the most important social commerce platforms to reach Chinese Gen Z consumers. 89% of its users are female, 87% are aged between 18 to 34, 90% are based in tier 1, tier 2 cities. So basically, if you're looking to target young, wealthy women, this is the place to be. It's a platform that's grown in popularity, especially amongst these female consumers, due to its authenticity, reliable user-generated content, provides a trustworthy source of information and recommendations. Additionally, its algorithm utilizes machine learning, data analysis to create very personalized content and shopping experiences. It's got more than 200 million monthly active users, engages a large number of beauty enthusiasts. It's become a kind of home for very honest user reviews, as well as a way for brands to monitor some of the latest trends. The platform releases an annual key trends report in the beauty space, and this year included trends such as efficient skincare, haute makeup, stacking product, gender neutrality. It's a platform with over 40 million content creators, and netizens use it as a source for inspiration. While mega influencers are renowned for very large follower bases, it also has a long tail of micro, even nano influencers who specialize in very niche product categories and who are most favored by Red users wanting to learn more about a particular subject. The other big platform of note is, of course, Douyin, the Chinese original version of TikTok. It has become China's newest retail battleground, and it's completely upended China's beauty landscape. Both established companies and more upstart competitors are now learning how to leverage the platform and conquer the hearts and minds of its users. And though, of course, local players have home advantage, it's clear that international brands are actively fighting to grow their market share here as well. Data intelligence platform Feigua published some data the other day revealing that they reckon that the GMV for beauty brands only on Douyin e-commerce has already exceeded about $10 billion US dollars. As I said, about a 300% increase on the year before. And some of the big name multinational brands have completely pivoted their strategy towards this platform away from some of the more established platforms like Tmall that I mentioned before. L'Oreal is the best example of this. They reportedly work with about up to 1,500 Douyin influencers every single month, ranging from the big mega stars with over 5 million followers to small to medium key opinion consumers to promote their products and live streaming sessions. In the first half of 2022, so a while back now, when they first launched, their Douyin GMV was about $33 million. This year, they've quadrupled that. And by the end of this year, they reckon they're going to be doing about $280 million. So up from $30 million literally at the beginning of last year, a huge, huge shift. Now, across both of these platforms and the wider social e-commerce ecosystem, live streaming is, of course, the biggest trend to hit us the last couple of years. There are about 750 million people that are projected to tune into a live stream at some point this year. 1 in 7 Chinese people watch live streams at least weekly. And you can buy pretty much everything under the sun through live streaming. On the left-hand side here, we see one example of the kind of rural live streams that really took off during the pandemic. Here you can buy some pineapples through live stream to be shipped from rural locations into the city. You can buy property and cars. This is a live stream from Tesla in the middle through the platform. And probably my favorite one recently, coal. A live streamer I saw a few weeks ago selling Shanxi 5,500 kilocalorie spot coal at 570 yuan per metric ton, with people questioning here, how do you ship this and how many tons for a minimum purchase? Last year alone, there was an estimated $500 billion worth of goods sold via live streaming in China on apps like Douyin or Kuaishou, an 8-fold increase on 2019, a huge, huge shift. And of course, something we're starting to just about see taking off in Europe and the US, but China, as with so many of these different topics, is already light years ahead. Now, in the beauty space, the kind of top end of these case studies for live streaming are genuinely mind-blowing. Some of the star streamers have become celebrities in their own right. I couldn't do a beauty social commerce presentation without mentioning Austin Lee, the guy we see here, or Li Jiaqi, whose prowess at trying on and pitching makeup products earned him the nickname the Lipstick King. He attracts tens of millions of viewers for every session. He very famously generated $1.8 billion of GMV from one single 12-hour live stream. To put that into context, that's more than the annual revenue of China's largest chain of shopping malls. Another live streamer, Via, since cancelled, sold 15,000 bottles of perfume in a joint live stream with Kim Kardashian within just 5 minutes of it launching. I should also mention that Li Jiaqi's little dog that we see here is in its own right a live streamer and influencer. Did a crossover collaboration with Perfect Diary, a Chinese color cosmetic brand, a couple of years ago. Now, of course, these kind of influencer collaborations are unfortunately a little bit unattainable, but for all but the deepest pocketed international brands. But the exciting thing about the Chinese influencer or KOL space is its range. There are plenty more of more pared back, more sustainable, more affordable ways of doing influencer marketing. You might, for example, want to work with Yimeng Ling on the left-hand side here, 4.5 million followers, dubbed by, as an ambient beauty, referring to the kind of concept that beauty is not just a characteristic that differentiates people, but is an element of harmony. Or maybe with Ma Bauer in the middle here, she does these videos where she doesn't say anything. Instead, she just uses her rather long fingernails to tap on the side of a bottle and creates these kind of soundscapes of knocking, squeezing, rubbing, smearing, scratching, all of the different beauty products in a kind of ASMR style. Or maybe you might want to work with Shen Zichen, a male beauty influencer gaining momentum on Red with about 750,000 followers, sharing weekly massage and training exercises, herbal tea tips for followers looking to improve the appearance of their skin, all based on kind of traditional Chinese techniques and heritage. What's also interesting, I think, is that we're now entering an age of kind of influencer marketing 2.0, with kind of pioneering new ways of mediating relationships between brands and consumers. And I want to talk about a couple of different examples of this. The first is a very, very new one. It was literally released on the 24th of August, a couple of weeks ago, and that is so-called Red Commerce, or Little Red Book e-commerce. It's a new personal shopping feature, which marks kind of Red's official launch of its e-commerce division. And it's meant to do two things, really. One is to elevate Red's presence in this space and create a more connected experience, whilst also helping it to differentiate itself from other platforms in the space. And as a result, number two is offer a kind of antidote to this kind of buy mentality that you see on most live streams these days. The idea here is to connect lower level influencers with brand storefronts, and for those influencers to essentially act as personal shoppers. As a consumer, you get a very personal connection, whilst also having the ease of buying direct to consumer from those brands. Now, we don't really know what this is going to look like. It is very fresh off the press, and there's a kind of clear definition still kind of clearly lacking. But the idea here is, at least from all the PR that we've seen, is to create a more content-focused, community-driven style of live streaming in China. This idea of what they call a quiet live stream, where sharing of consumer experience, rational reviews are at the forefront, as well as the kind of personalities and the qualities of the individuals leading those live streams. The idea is that Red will become a more persuasive, more appealing style of selling to the user demographics that actually use the platform, those that are tend to be a little bit wealthier, a bit more knowledgeable in the fields that are related to their interests. Is therefore going to allow Red to leverage its unique user base to grab a slice of the lucrative live streaming space. And I think for any brand that's in that kind of premium to luxury space, this is a particularly exciting development in the overall live streaming mix. Now, giving a talk on beauty and skincare trends and platforms, I couldn't leave out Beauty Evolution as well, a site criminally left out of so many skincare brands' content and marketing strategies in China. It's not a big player compared with the likes of Red or Douyin or what have you. It's only got about 40 million users, but it caters specifically to the importance of the so-called Chengfendang, or skintellectuals, the ingredients group, beauty ingredient aficionados. Now, in addition to product efficacy, active ingredients, these skintellectuals are demanding products that really showcase that and are able to prove it. They value expert reviews, detailed product testing, brand transparency, trusted endorsements. The more functional ingredients, the better. And Skintellectuals 2.0, if you like, are really valuing how these ingredients are scientifically formulated and targeted. And many of them will use this platform to compare product tests, post screenshots of lab results, share entire ingredient lists and analysis. And a whole bunch of different hashtags have flowed through from Beauty Evolution into other platforms like Red, really speaking to the importance of this at the heart of many brand strategies. So hashtags like morning C, evening A, nourishing skin with oil, morning protect, evening recover, new tribes such as the Peifangdang or the Zhengjudang, the former being kind of people that look carefully at the concentration of ingredients and the pH level of products to find suitable options. Zhongdudang, referring to consumers that demand evidence and results from skincare businesses. Many brands overlook this platform, probably because it's not transactional. You can't sell products on here, but as a font of respected, authoritative opinion in a consumer space that really values those kinds of proofs when in the overall kind of consumer purchasing journey. It is an unrivaled platform in terms of its importance and knock-on effect. And of course, there's a very long tail of other platforms that I simply don't have the time to cover off today. Kuaishou, Pinduoduo, as well as others that are traditionally used in beauty, not used in beauty marketing, I should say, but offer the ability to tap some of the communities, some of the trends that I've spoken about a little bit today. One of my favorite campaigns from the last few months was actually for Lunar New Year at the start of this year. Lancôme partnered with Small Cosmo FM, a podcasting platform, and worked with 7 podcasters to share their stories of staying up late at night, a very big problem amongst younger consumers in particular. Through that campaign, they were able to kind of communicate brand authenticity, draw on Gen Z's love of podcasts at the moment in China, the personalities behind the shows, and create a kind of emotional connection that resonated with those target audiences in a very authentic way. So there we have it, a whirlwind introduction to some of the trends shaping China's consumer and e-commerce space, as told through some of the movers and shakers driving it forward. Impressive, if not a little intimidating, I think. What, of course, I haven't done today is tell you how to make all of this happen, the intricacies of cross-border e-commerce, how you get product in, how you get money out. That's a topic for another day or another conversation. But what I will leave you with are 5 key top-line takeaways, top tips, if you like, to keep in mind when it comes to China. The first, of course, is focus on that consumer market fit. The old mantras of price, logo recognition being the most important things are starting to diversify, and we're seeing a greater mix of factors now going into that customer buying cycle. The prestige, similarly, of just being a foreign brand is long behind us. Instead, what you need to do is focus on relevance, finding a solution that you believe you can provide to consumers, and crucially figuring out how you differentiate that from others in the space. Only on that basis will you then be able to tailor your localized messaging, tease out iterations of your global brand identity that cater to those local sensitivities. You then also need to be community first, bottom up. It can help to identify some specific countercultures and consumer niches that I mentioned before, build genuine rapport through the kind of gatekeepers and tastemakers in that space, and develop a kind of clever channel strategy to go with that. As I mentioned before, the standard routes to market are saturated. Niche platforms, niche distribution models, using influencers in particular, are the way to cut through these days. Thirdly, you've got to be open-minded. So many of the case studies I've shared today hinged on a very collaborative approach. China's a market that requires a high degree of modesty. You cannot afford to be arrogant in believing that you are able to assume a one-size-fits-all approach to the market. Be creative, be open to working with a wide range of different partners, whether those influencers, other brands, even businesses outside of the beauty space, and above all, be agile. Fourth, and maybe the most important, is finding the right partner and investing smart. Again, all routes to market are broken. Anyone who comes to you and tries to sell you on a Tmall first approach is unlikely to themselves have the agility and the consumer know-how necessary to make China work for you. There are many, many different options out there, YASO, of course, being one of them. And ultimately, you need someone that combines in-depth, on-the-ground knowledge and a team with a very forward-looking China mindset as well. And then fifth, probably the most easy one to get started with is just SWOT up, learn more, be curious. Attending today's webinar is a great starting point. But as I said, we've also got our trends report coming out. And then finally, our Beauty Growth Summit happening at the beginning of October. Tickets, I believe, going live as of now. So do check that out. And that's it. That was a whirlwind. I thought I was going to have a little bit more time for questions, but as ever with these topics, it's difficult to fit it into such a short period of time. Thank you so much all for listening. I think we do have a few minutes for questions if anybody has any, but otherwise, as ever, we remain available over email and look forward to engaging with as many of you offline as possible. Any questions?
I've got a question, Adam.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So there's been a lot of negative press lately, a lot of negative news coverage on the current state of the Chinese economy, lots of ups and downs. If you're a beauty brand, is it still worth trying to enter the Chinese market? What would you say to brands that are worried about all the current news coverage on the Chinese economy?
Yeah, it's been a difficult year. I don't think we can skirt around that for consumer retail in China, as it has been everywhere else in the world. And I think that's the thing to emphasize, is that China's not alone in facing some of the difficulties that it is right now. And the thing you've always got to come back to is just show me another market that has the same opportunity. Yes, it's got more difficult. Yes, it's got more complex. And that just means that brands have to work that little bit harder to make it work for them. The old model of just being able to rock up, set up a virtual market stall in the form of a Tmall store or whatever, and being able to just shift some product based on being a foreign brand, those days are well and truly behind us. These days, you really do need to have a very localized strategy and work, like I said, that much harder in order to make the market work. But conversely, that means that if you are able to do that, the market's ripe for the taking. There are a lot of more established players that are hurting at the moment because they haven't been able to be agile and respond to all of the trends that I've talked about today. So if you can identify those little niches and then drill down hard on them, there's definitely still a lot of money to be made. Great. Any more questions from anybody? If not, we will be sending, I believe, probably sending these slides around afterwards, as well as
we do have a comment in the chat on not talking about growth. To be fair, Johnny, it's an hour, and we've covered a lot in an hour, and I think we could spend a whole day talking about growth, platforms, and trends in the Chinese e-commerce beauty market. But if you keep an eye out for our trends report, that's going to address a lot of the growth and platform and trends as well in China. But thanks.
Yeah, huge topic. Lots to cover. Great. Cool. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, we will be sending around the slides as well as links to the trends report that we have coming out, as well as, of course, links to the Beauty Growth Summit that we are co-hosting in a week's time. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we will speak very soon. Bye-bye.